Good evening. Welcome. I am Kelsey Griffey, the Information Officer for the Great Basin Team 1, and welcome to the Camp Creek Fire Community Meeting. This meeting is airing live on the Camp Creek Fire Facebook. We will do our best to accommodate our virtual audience, no guarantees with those gremlins, but we will try to get a recording, if anything, up after. We are recording from Corbett, Oregon today, and we will not be taking any questions until after the speakers are done, and then we will spend plenty of time getting all of your questions answered. For our virtual audience, we are standing by with information officers to answer your questions as quickly as possible, and we will keep answering them until we've answered them all. So unfortunately, last night, due to the heavy cloud cover, we were not able to get an updated acreage. So the most accurate perimeter that we have is still the 1,607, but our incident commander will address some of that fire behavior with our operations section chief. The Camp Creek fire is 0% contained, and we now have 306 personnel on the fire, with more coming in every day. Our speakers this evening are Chief Rick Wunsch from Corbett Fire. Thank you for hosting us tonight. And then our Jeremy Goers from the West Zone, our Fire Management Officer for Mount Hood National Forest, Isaac Ponning, our Operations Section Chief from Great Basin Team 1. John Farmer is joining us from Portland General Electric. We have Chris Voss, Emergency Manager for Multnomah County, and Gar Abbas, Deputy Forest Supervisor for the Mount Hood National Forest, and Evans Quo, Incident Commander for Great Basin Team 1. Let's get this going with Chief Wunsch.
Oh, thank you. I'm Rick with the Corbett Fire Department, the chief up here, and I just will be a brief minute. Just wanted to go over a few things that Corbett Fire is doing up here. As we know, the fire started Friday morning up here, and we've been getting updates constantly from our partners. So we're up to speed on what's going on. The fire over the corner of my shoulder here kind of tells you the picture. Just to let you know what we're doing. It's on Forest Service land. They've got a lot of resources out there. They've got more coming. Feel good about that. One thing we do want to let you know that if the event it does come off of there, we've got other partners with Oregon State Fire Marshal, ODF, and of course us at Corbett Fire. We are ready to go and protect structures and do what we have to. We're coming up on the anniversary of the Eagle Creek fire 6 years ago. A lot of us in this room have memories of that. One thing that we did was we've learned a lot of lessons in 2017 from the Eagle Creek fire, and I'm talking about our agency, and again in 2020 when we had the big wind event that really impacted our neighbors to the south. During that wind event out here in Corbett, we learned from the Eagle Creek fire, let's get our resources out early and get them all over the fire district. At the time, our current fire marshal, retired from the fire chief's position, Dave Flood, he did just that. He sent those resources all over our fire district. We had 17 calls in 3 hours. All of those were taken care of by our dedicated members of our fire department. I couldn't be more proud of them. And we'll let you know, they're not only your firefighters out here, they're your neighbors, and they're ready to do it again if needed. So there's a lot of information that's going to come out. I'm confident in the teams that are in front of me here, and I'm excited to hear what they have to say. So I'll pass that back over.
Thank you, Chief. Jeremy from Mount Hood National Forest, Fire Management Officer.
Yeah, good evening. So I'm here to talk about kind of just that first 24 hours, the initial attack of this fire. So on August 24th, there was the lightning storm that came through, pretty much missed almost all of the Mount Hood except for 2 strikes in the Bull Run. And kind of like Chief said, with the way things were going with the seasonal severity, how dry it was, definitely everyone was on edge. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, almost 3 o'clock in the morning, the Pano AI cameras that PGE hosts for us picked up the fire. 3 cameras picked it up, basically triangulated, gave us the lat long where the fire was. At that point, we sent folks out. I think at that point, Corbett Fire had people out there. By 3:30, we had 2 Forest Service engines, our Forest Service IC, Type 3 IC, an engine from Hoodland Fire, and an engine from Corbett Fire, as well as a Clackamas Fire engine. Really pretty remarkable to have that many agencies out there at 3:30 in the morning. What they found when they got there was a fire of 10 acres. Which is pretty big for what we would normally expect for this time of year, but burning in really heavy fuel, so really big trees, trees covered in lichen and moss. And then with just in the Bull Run, you have really deep duff in there. Duff just being that burnable vegetation below the ground. So that stuff's anywhere from, say, 2 feet, 6 feet to 8 feet deep of burnable material. Couple that with trees that are, almost 200 feet tall. So you have 200 plus feet, above the ground, and then 8 feet, say, below the ground that can burn. So fires in that are really, really hard to put out, especially with where we are with just the dryness of the summer. So 10 acres, definitely, it was moving readily. Probably the flame lengths are 1 to 3 feet. For 3:30 in the morning is really pretty good. Normally, as you guys know, the humidity comes up at night. Fires don't usually want to burn that well at night, but this was definitely moving, wasn't moving very fast, but still those flames just kind of kept on going. And definitely with that burnable material, it was definitely difficult to stop. Whenever we go to these fires, we always talk about what are the values at risk. When we hear fire in the Bull Run, that's going to get all of our hackles up. Definitely a huge issue for us. A huge value at risk just having that drinking water there. And so, that was kind of the primary concern. And then, as this started growing throughout the day, you start to look around what's on the Bull Run. You've got, Corbett out here to the west. You've got Sandy. You've got Brightwood, Welch's, Marmot, all that stuff. And so that all really played a huge part with, kind of how we reacted to this fire, knowing it was going to be such a big deal. At 7 in the morning, GPS the fire at 33 acres. It was holding pretty well on some of the roads, which is really great because that's way less work firefighters have to do if we can work off of roads. We had started to get more crews in by 9 o'clock. 10 o'clock, I want to say our first helicopter started showing up. So Type 1 helicopters, so the really big helicopters. Got the approval to start pulling water from Reservoir 1 in the Bull Run, which is, that in itself is a really big deal. So that kind of shows you the level of, I'd say, commitment that we had to putting this fire out or trying to put it out. At 12:30, the request for retardant came in, and so lots of discussions amongst the forest on whether we can do that. With the concerns with dropping retardant in the watershed is a very big deal. Certainly don't want to put that stuff in the drinking water and just the bad things that can come from that. And so by 12:30 had the approval, and sometime half hour, 45 minutes later, had retardant dropping on the south side of the fire. That was mainly where the fire was moving at that point, and just trying to do whatever we could to slow that thing down. So throughout the day, had helicopters, we had the scoopers pulling out of the Columbia, skimming across the Columbia, picking up water, dropping it on the fire. Those guys doing hot laps just for hours at a time. We had helicopters working, had air attack up, coordinating all that effort from the air. And, as we started to get more and more folks in, by the end of the day, 2100, 9 o'clock at night, fire was approximately 60 acres. We had probably 100 people on the fire. And our local type 3 team, so we had an IC, we had operations, logistics, plans, finance, all out there engaged. And luckily our friends out at Timberlake Job Corps were lucky enough to feed us and be hauling in food for all the firefighters that first night. And so really that first day, it was everything we possibly could. We threw everything we possibly could that was in the area at this. The fire still kept on growing because of the heavy fuel loading above the ground, because of the heavy fuel loading below the ground, because of the lichen in the trees that would burn up to the treetops and then start dropping down on other trees, and just made it really difficult for firefighters to really get a good handle on this. So that first shift, we were super lucky to get all that stuff, pretty much everything we wanted and more. Again, still just, unlucky, could not get a real good handle on that. At about, I think 2 or 3 in the afternoon, the decision was made to order up a type 1 team, or a complex incident management team, sorry. And we were lucky enough to have the Great Basin team close by. They started coming, and so we in-briefed the next day, and so we're pretty lucky to have all of these resources right there. And people heard fire in the Bull Run, and everyone came running. So really that count that first day, we had 6 agencies out there, which is really pretty incredible for a fire like this. Type 1 helicopters, scoopers, retardant. So yeah, definitely a busy day that we were unsuccessful, and happily handed the fire over to the Great Basin team, and I will leave you with that.
Thanks, Jeremy. So now for an update from the Fire Isaac Pawning Operations Section Chief.
Thank you. Good evening, Isaac Pounding Operations for Great Basin Team 1. So just a shout out for Jeremy and his team. They were successful. They did an outstanding job when we came in, providing us with a lot of the local knowledge. We don't fight a lot of fire in country like this, fuels like this around the nation. So shout out to Jeremy and his team for setting us up for success. So I'm just going to provide you guys a little update on where we're at currently on the fire. When we took command of the fire, we broke it down into 2 different branches. You'll see branch 1, which is up on the north end of the fire, and then branch 3, which is the south end of the fire. In doing that, we threw in a few division supervisors and group supervisors in the mix for span of control for the resources that we had out there. Starting off around the reservoir, I'm too short for this, but in the reservoir up above where all the blue is up there, we brought in Portland Fire. They've came in and they've set up a bunch of structure protection, sprinklers around all the infrastructure at the headworks, up at the bear cabin, throughout that area, and they've got that pretty well done at this point. Now they're kind of doing a little bit of quality control in there, taking back some of the brush and timber that's around those structures. Moving over into Division Alpha, which is the north end of the fire. That road up there above that's Forest Service Road 12. Division Alpha, we've had some pretty good success with Mother Nature the last couple of days. and have allowed us some opportunity to address this fire. So our original plan when we came in was to hold the fire to the south of the 12 road. And what we've been doing on that 12 road is prepping it, falling snags all along that 12 road from out about where the arrow is, all the way out to right above about where the K is. That prep has been mostly done. Right now, we're just in there doing some snagging in there for firefighter safety. Um, with the fire yesterday, it has actually came down to the road in what they call the key house, and that provided us with some opportunity. It gave us a little toehold on that. So what we have started doing in that case is taking fire and bringing fire down off the hill, down to the road, where it's much easier to manage, much safer to manage. And we've drug fire up to about here right now. So we've got fire all along that edge of the road to that point. The plan is to continue with the weather to drag that fire up to the 1210 road, which is right about there. Sorry. So that's our plan right now. Conditions are favorable for that. The fire's just burning back into itself, so we're pretty thrilled about that. Moving over onto the east side of the fire, which is Division Kilo. As I mentioned, our original plan, which we're still implementing that plan right now, is to continue brushing that road and then looking at taking heavy equipment down from that 12 road down to the 1210 road, right about in this area. And then we'll be utilizing the 1210 road around back down to the 14 road. With the weather that we're having, we're seeing other opportunities right now. We've got a dozer and a feller buncher that we brought in, and they're going to be going direct from this little spur road off the middle and taking that back down to the 12 road. And then hand crews will be going direct on the piece back down to the 1210 road and tying it into this road. This fire on this road has been hung up and just staying on that road. So we're going to take advantage of that. Moving around down into Division Papa, which is on the south end of the fire, along the 14 road. What we've done in there is we placed a hand line right about here that ties in the 14 road and the 12 road. That line is in and snagged and ready to be utilized. And we're currently putting some water handling equipment and sprinklers in on that hand line as well. Additionally, on that 14 road, we're continuing to prep that road out to the 1210 road because that is our primary line there. And that prep is all in as well and snagged. And the folks are laying hose and sprinklers and a lot of good stuff along that road too. The fire has made it to that road, which is going to provide us some other opportunity. We are going to be looking at potentially seeing if we can grab the fire's edge on that east side and squeeze it in over on that west side. Down further south, down in the bottom of branch 3, we have a structure group and a contingency group. And both of those folks and resources out there are working with a lot of our federal, state, local partners down on that south end, putting together a contingency plan, putting together a structure protection plan. Additionally, they're down there right now on the Brightwood communication site, and they're prepping that along with some resources from the Portland Water Bureau. A lot of people are questioning how come they're not seeing aircraft right now. We haven't been able to use aircraft in the last 2 days just due to the visibility of the aircraft. A lot of smoke in there, a lot of clouds in there. So in fact, yesterday, the folks were using headlamps at midday while they were prepping the roads and treating the roads. We were able to get air attack up today for about 45 minutes, and he had to squeak out just because of the visibility being so low. So that's the current fire situation. Oh, I do want to address, even with all this wetting rain that we're getting, this fire still is burning actively. Most of the active burning is in the Cedar Creek and in the bottom of the South Fork of the Bull Run, as well as a little bit over here on this east side, or I'm sorry, correction, west side. But most of that's us right now, and we're having a lot of good success on that.
Thank you, Isaac. So from Portland General Electric, we have John Farmer.
Hey everyone, good evening. I'm John, as she said, and thank you very much for inviting PGE to this event. So I've got 4 things that I want to share with you tonight, and so we'll just jump right in. So number 1, probably the topic that on everyone's mind is public safety power shutoff, or PSPS. Based on current forecasts and the conditions and collaborations with the agencies here, we are not planning to call a PSPS or public safety power shutoff at this time. We are just one player on a large team of agencies and organizations, many of which are represented here, and that are working year-round on wildfire mitigation, response, and prevention. Safety is always our number 1 concern. This is not a one-off issue for us, and it's something we do all year long. So number 2, what would necessitate a public safety power shutoff? So in the event of extreme conditions, we'll call a PSPS to protect lives, communities, and public spaces. And it's anchored in the notion of keeping everyone safe. But we do not take the decision to call a PSPS lightly. We look at a wide range of factors, and I've listed them here because there's so many, that include wind speeds, moisture levels in trees and brush, temperature, humidity, real-time observations from the field. And again, we do it in partnership with a lot of the folks you see here in this room. Now, if you'd like to learn more about how PGE works year-round to reduce the risk of wildfire and some simple actions that you can take yourselves, please give us a call. Check our website. We've got a lot of great information that we'd love to share with you. So the third thing, communication. So we communicate with all of our customers about our efforts to reduce the risk of wildfire. I'm sure some of you have received emails, texts, you may have seen some stories in the news. That's all our effort to make sure everyone understands what's going on and what we're doing and what everyone else can do to pitch in. Now, if you haven't enrolled in our proactive text notifications, I really encourage you to do that. And when you do that, please make sure that your contact information is updated in your PGE account. That really obviously helps us stay in communication with you when we really need to. Now, if conditions were such that we needed to call a PSPS, which we do not foresee happening right now, we would provide you with advance notice and notification, and we would keep you updated all throughout the entire event. The last thing, number 4, is the medical certificate program. So if you rely on power for medical equipment, health needs, things like that, and you haven't talked to us about the medical certificate program, I really encourage you to give us a call. We have an amazing customer service team who would love to walk through that with you, help you get enrolled, and then that's one more step of preparation that we can all do together. That's it. I said it'd be short and sweet. Thanks so much again for this opportunity to share, and yeah, have a good night.
Thank you. Okay, Multnomah County Emergency Manager, Chris Foss.
Well, good evening, everybody. First off, let me just say there are no current evacuation levels. So that's the good news. And as you're looking at this map, unfortunately, no one told this fire that it was supposed to stay south of the Multnomah County Clackamas line. It's just started to creep a little bit north, so we've got about 1% of the fire, and probably Clackamas County's got the other 99% of the fire. I do want to leave you with a few pieces of information here and important points that I want to make sure everybody knows. One, you'll probably see cards back there that look a little like this. You'll see sort of the alert notification system that we use. It's publicalerts.org. We ask that you sign up for this information. We ask you to sign up really for 2 reasons. You've heard a lot about kind of where we are, but this might not be a short-term event. This thing may be with us for a little while. And because it's going to be with us for a little while, it means that there might be information that we need to sort of push to the community. some of the types of information that will push that community are the evacuation levels. If we do reach evacuation levels, if we've reached that point, that would include information about shelter locations. And we're working very, very closely with our partner to the south, which still has about 99% of the fire, on many of those locations and what we would do. And also try to make it easier for folks so that in reality, if you, we don't want to bombard you with messages. We'd love to send sort of one message to the community. And so you might see one message from both of us simultaneously to push out a lot of that messaging. So another interesting piece to this event, though, too, is that that blue stripe. A lot of you are aware that that is controlled and is your water source for several communities in and around Multnomah County. It's not the water source for Corbett, so if you're living in Corbett, good news, you'll be okay. But there's also a lot of water systems that are not Portland waters that actually get their water from Portland. So it doesn't have to be just Portland water that is impacted. And they just happen to be one of the closest groups to this fire. And so we're also working very, very closely with the Portland Water Bureau on addressing what might happen if, in fact, they can't utilize this source, which for the most part involves a curtailment of water. Because right now in the summer, we use more water than they can pump from the pumps. So that means everybody's got to sort of use a little bit less. Once we get into the winter, overall water usage goes down. And so it just so happens that those pumps would likely be enough water for everybody without curtailment. But in the next probably 4-6 weeks or so, we're not in that environment yet. So we're hoping that this fire continues to do what it does, which is move really, really slow, smolder, maybe even back up over itself. And so we don't have to necessarily address those issues. But you'll see all these mileages. And the one you're not seeing is the headwaters, where there's one person that's working for the Water Bureau that's controlling that water. He's 2 miles away. And so we're a little bit more concerned about that worker, and they might be a little bit closer to evacuation than some other folks. So I also, I talked a little about sort of shelters. And shelters are important. We get this question a lot. It's like, well, can you tell us where you're going to be now? And I said, this is going to be a long-term event. And so I can tell you, we're working with a lot of organizations. There's the Clackamas County Fairgrounds, there's Mount Hood Community College. But if I told you that Mount Hood Community College tomorrow, the reality is those students come back in 2 weeks. So it might be a great location now, but it may not be a great location later. That's why we want you to sign up, so we can get you the best information when we have it based on what we're seeing on the ground. So I'd be remiss if I didn't thank all the teams that are sort of working this one. I am the emergency manager, which means I sit in a room behind a desk a lot thinking about worst case scenarios, and those guys are doing the hard work. So I want to thank everybody who's doing the work and thank the community. And I'm going to be here for a little while to answer any questions. And I have another counterpart here. Dave, where are you? Raise your hand. Dave, there we go. I've got another counterpart. So if you've got a lot of questions for the county, we're going to be here to answer your questions after the briefing. So thank you.
All right, Gar Abbas, Deputy Forest Supervisor for the Mount Hood.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming out to listen in on our information. And as was mentioned, and obviously I work for the Mount Hood National Forest, but really what I wanted to share with you tonight is that I'm part of a much larger team. All the folks that you heard speak tonight, and couple dozen actually more folks are working together constantly all day long to figure out the best way to approach this, to manage this, and to do the best we can to make sure this event has the least impact on all of us as possible. It's truly amazing if you could be there all day long with all the different connections that are made, all the different concerns that are highlighted, all the different people involved in doing the best we can to serve the public. And the great thing about all of this is everybody so far that's involved in this has the same 2 priorities that are lined up, and we're all working together on those 2 priorities. One of them being, of course, the communities that you see highlighted on the map up here, and making sure that the people in those communities and their possessions, their homes, are not impacted to the greatest extent possible. And then the other priority, of course, is that blue stripe up there and the water that it provides to so many communities, up and down the corridor here. So those two things are what's on everybody's mind and what everybody is working to protect. And we want to do everything we can to prevent any impact on you and the rest of these other communities out here. So as was mentioned, and we'll get a little more into the details here, but that fire is been doing, it's not been doing as much as it could. We've been very lucky with the weather over the last several days. We're very lucky that the weather outlook is pretty good for the next several days. And as was mentioned with our operations briefing, we've got some pretty good outlook on opportunities for us to get a lot of progress on taking control of at least portions of this fire right away, and then figuring out what to do with those other portions once we've got that dialed in. So things are looking really good right now. We're optimistic, but we're not overly optimistic, of course, and you always have to plan for the worst. So as was mentioned, there's contingency plans going in place out there. There's lots of pre-planning going on, and everybody's doing everything they can to look out for you and your families. So just wanted to share that, and with that, I'll turn it back to over to here, and you'll hear a little bit more from our incident commander, who's really guiding all the folks on the ground out there on how best to approach this. So thank you.
Thanks, Guy. So, we're about to hear from our incident commander, but before that, I'd like you all to know that we'll roll right into questions after he speaks. For the questions, please keep all questions relevant to the Camp Creek fire. We will have subject matter experts around the room by maps to answer questions specific to you or any concerns that you have, but please keep them relevant to the Camp Creek fire. Once the incident commander is done speaking, we'll have you line up in the center of the aisle to be able to hear your question here and online so that your question can help everyone out. And Michael will be assisting you, the tall man in the back. So I'm going to pass it to Ensign Commander Evans Quo.
Thank you, Kelsey. Mike, could you zoom out to the full extent? So, good evening, everybody. Like Kelsey said, my name is Evans Quo. I'm the incident commander for Great Basin Team 1. And Chief Rick, thank you very much for hosting us. I'm going to go on a little bit of a limb, and I'm going to ask, I'm assuming this community has, you've been through fire public meetings like this before in the past? Yeah. And so you've run into teams like mine in the past because you've gone through multiple fires? Okay. Yeah, it's unfortunately, we have to be here again. A lot of fires are, in some ways, they're the same, but also each one is, over the course of my career, I found each one is somewhat unique in its own way. And this fire is by no means different from that because it does have its own unique set of values. The main management direction we've been given to manage this fire is to suppress it at the smallest possible size possible without compromising firefighter safety. The reason for that is there's a lot of values around this fire, pretty much in like a 270-degree direction. So in addition to the municipal watershed, the Bull Run watershed, which is approximately like so, a lot of communities, Sandy itself and a lot of the smaller communities off to the west side, and then of course along Highway 26, all those small communities out that way going over towards Mount Hood, and then of course your community up here. So it's almost surrounded on, three sides, well, four, I guess, by these very highly important values that if the fire were to get in there because of the nature of the fuels, we're looking at some not very good outcomes. So we're taking this fire very, very seriously. Isaac talked a lot about what we were doing on the ground. I wanted to just spend a little bit of time talking to you folks about the why behind the what, and then also go a little bit about our intentions over the next week or two while we're here. So the why what we're doing is, Isaac described, we're using this road network to try to hem the fire in as much as possible because we don't want the fire going north into the watershed with all the infrastructure of the water treatment plants for obvious reasons. It's people's drinking water. We don't want it going south of the 14 road because then we start getting closer to the PGE power line and then all the communities along Highway 26. And then we certainly don't want it going west downriver because of all the communities out towards kind of the mouth of Bull Run. And then one gentleman was asking me about the chemical treatment plant in that area with all the chlorine. We certainly don't want the fire getting close to that either. So we don't want the fire going west, we don't want the fire going north, and we don't really want the fire going south. We're fortunate in that past management activities out in the watershed, they left us with a road network that we're able to use to our best advantages. To right now, we've assessed that that's probably our best likelihood of being able to stop this fire, and try to keep it at as small as possible size. As Gar mentioned, we are doing a lot of coordination and planning with all the various entities, the various fire departments, county emergency management services in both counties, Clackamas as well as Multnomah County, as well as the Oregon State Fire Marshal, because in the event that this fire moves in any one of these directions, goes that way, goes south, goes southeast, it's going to impact multiple jurisdictions beyond just the Forest Service and the Oregon Department of Forestry. So we're working with all those agencies that have jurisdiction, both at the local, state, and government level, to figure out, okay, what are our plans? What would we do ahead of time? And I know that for the folks that lived through the 2020 Labor Day storm, with all the east winds kicked up all the fires from here going all the way down to San Diego. That was quite the event, and it sounds like everybody has a good memory of that, but more importantly, we all learned a lot of things. And one of the things we learned about was the last thing you want to be doing is emergency planning for evacuation and also contingency plans for fires during the heat of battle. So we're taking the time right now, while we can do it in an orderly fashion, take the time, really research it out, think it through, to work out what would we do in the event the fire moved in a certain direction. How much time do the law enforcement folks need and the fire departments need to get the warnings out to people? How long do people need to get out of there in an orderly fashion so it's not a panic? Because I've driven some of your guys' roads, and it seems like a lot of them are windy, tight turns, switchbacks, one jackknife horse trailer, and that road's closed for everybody else behind you. So we want to be able to do it in a more orderly fashion. So we're working out these plans, these contingency plans, in the event that we cannot hold the fire to this road network system. By having Isaac and his folks out there, we're having very much in real time updates as far as what's going on out there, what our successes are looking like, or if we think that we're going to be challenged. And as soon as something untoward happens where it looks like that road network is going to be compromised, they're right out there. They can let the rest of us know, and then we can start contacting Portland Water Bureau. We can start contacting the Portland Fire Department or the hazmat folks for the chlorine place. We can start contacting the various county emergency services to say, yeah, it looks like we might be looking at, sometime in the next few hours, we might need to trigger one of the alerts. Most likely we'll probably start off with the lower level of the, I think, you guys have the levels 1, 2, and 3 for evacuation. 1 is like get ready, maybe start putting, excuse me. 1 is start putting some information together. Level 2 is, yeah, you might want to have like the horse trailer hooked up. And then level 3 is, yeah, now is time to leave. So through that process that we were working out with the various emergency services, we feel like we're starting to get a pretty good plan. So in the event that one of these things happen, we'll be able to get the word out quickly. We'll be able to keep everybody informed, and then proceed with that right there. But again, if we're successful keeping the fire inside the road network, all of this is just a planning exercise. But we feel that it's better to be prepared and not need it than need it and not be prepared. The other thing I'd like to talk about is, so moving forward, this current weather that we're having, it's kind of nice and cool. Little respite from what Jeremy and his folks had to deal with when this fire first took off. I mean, we were under a high pressure system. That high pressure system has now since moved off to the east, bringing 90 and triple digits to eastern and central Oregon. And behind it, we had the first series of little low pressure systems last night come through, bringing some additional moisture, scattered showers. I mean, being from Idaho, we would call that rain. I think around here, you guys would call that mist, or just normal, right? So, and then we have another low pressure system coming through Wednesday, Thursday timeframe, and then another one coming through Friday, Saturday. So we have a series of these pulses coming through. We may get a little bit of breezy conditions about middle of the week, and the forecast right now is talking a little bit about an east wind. But I don't think it's going to be that east wind that you would really be worried about, because what we were going to have is about a couple days of these cool, damp little shots of moisture to tone things down. Nothing like what it was Labor Day weekend 2 years ago. So with that little bit of respite is probably going to give us 5-7 days of reasonable firefighting weather to be able to do a lot of those activities that Isaac was talking about. And it also buys us time to get additional resources in. Right now, I think we're probably upwards of about 305, 310 firefighters on the ground, which is up from yesterday. And we have more on the way. So I imagine probably by tomorrow, we're probably going to be close to 400 firefighters. So every day we're getting more resources coming in. And we've gotten fills on some of the critical equipment that we need, such as the heavy, the feller buncher types, the log forwarders, and the masticators that we need to really help improve some of these roads. And then we're also looking at some of these roads to the south as contingency lines in the event that we're unsuccessful here. We estimate 10 days or so to get those lines installed. So it's like we might as well start now because we don't want to be doing it in a rush when we're behind the power curve, so to speak. So that's our intention moving forward is we're going to continue working this fire, doing our best to keep it inside the road network, but at the same time, because we're somewhat pessimistic about our odds, and I'm not in the business of giving people odds, we'd like to be prepared. We're going to start implementing some of those contingency plans where we think we have most likely the fire would most likely threaten or try to breach our containment area. So, and then as long as we're here, we're also going to fulfill the other requirement that the land management agencies asked of us, which is continue to feed the information out to the public. We understand that there's a lot of communities around here, a lot of people with vested interest, not only in this fire, but also with the possible long-term effects it could have on their water supply in general, or the air quality, or the potential threat to their homes. So through our mechanisms that we're able to bring with all the people, all the public information people we have, through meetings like this, through the pop-ups that they're going to do in some of the smaller communities, the press releases, some of the things that we're able to do on social media with short video clips. We just want to get as much information out to folks on a timely basis, so to help keep everybody informed of what's going on, because that is important to us that you folks are aware of what's happening. So I think that's about it. I guess I'll pause there to see if there's any questions you folks have for me in particular. Thank you, ma'am. Do we have any questions online?
So one of the questions coming up online is about the use of aircraft and with the limited visibility, but it doesn't always look that limited. So could you please explain?
So we currently have, I think it's 2 of the Canadair CL-415 scoopers assigned to us. Those are the fixed-wing airplanes that they skim. They don't land on the ground to refuel. They just kind of skim the waterways, and then as a result of that, they're able to fill up their tanks. It's like 1,200 to 1,400 gallons, depending on the altitude. And we have this wonderful water supply just north of us called the Columbia River. I mean, it's almost perfect for our needs. We also have 3 Type 1 helicopters, anywhere from 700-800 gallons on the low end to maybe right around 1,000 gallons on the high end. And so we've been using those fairly effectively to support the hand crew operations out there. We're somewhat reluctant to use retardant on this fire, especially close to the waterways, just because retardant it's nitrates. It's mostly fertilizer, a little bit of clay in there for the color and the plasticity, but yeah, getting those chemicals in the waterway is probably not a good idea. So we've been somewhat reluctant to drop retardant unless we can find some place that doesn't have any live stream waterways high up on the ridge where the initial attack folks put the retardant up on the 14 road. That might be possible. But what we found over my career, I think, is the best use of aircraft is in conjunction to directly support the fire crews on the ground. So what we use the aircraft for is they come in and they drop the water. It knocks the heat out of the fire and allows the firefighters to get close. They get close, they can establish the fire line, which ultimately stops the fire. So just using aircraft on its own, just dropping on the fire, it's not the most effective tactic, to be honest. You may have the effect of it takes the heat out of it, but after an hour or so, the residual heat that's smoldering will just dry everything out, and next thing you know, the fire picks back up in intensity, and we're back to where we were. Flying that low with that much weight, and then suddenly lose like a third of your mass. Um, let's just say it's a pretty challenging operation, and we hold those pilots in extremely high regard for their skill and bravery to be able to do that, because you really should not be flying a plane that low to the ground without your landing gear down and ready to land. So, but yet they do it. There's other challenges too, especially at the head of the fire, the visibility. Like, was it Saturday or Friday and Saturday when we first got here, the wind was blowing pretty decently out of the west, so the column was laying over it was bending right over where it says Division K on the map, and so the head of the fire, you're pretty much obscuring the vision. And fixed-wing pilots need at least a minimum of 3 miles of visibility in order to fly safely. Helicopters can probably get away with like 3/4 of a mile, but imagine, well, you guys know what it's like driving around here in the wintertime when it's foggy out, right? It's and you can look out your side window and look at the lines on the road. These guys have no visual reference up in the air. So flying into very smoky conditions, or like the other day when the ceiling was down around 800 feet above the ground, when it was all mist, it just provides challenges for them to fly. If they can't see it, they can't hit it. So, but nonetheless, we do try to use the aircraft when and where it'll do us the most good. We don't want to just randomly throw aircraft out there just to drop on the fire, because what we found out over the years is it's not very effective, and it's putting them at risk. So hopefully that answers that question about aircraft use.
Oh, hi. Thank you for being here, all of you, and for what you're doing. I listened to the meeting in Welch's last night, and one thing that I wondered if you could do for us too is do as you did there and say what specific fire behavior would begin to trigger level 1 evacuations for Corbett.
So for Corbett, that's a different situation than Welch's. So I once got a question from at a public meeting, and they asked me, what's a good wind direction? Well, it really depends on which side of the fire you live on, right? So, I mean, if the wind's coming out of the west, it's blowing the fire east. So anybody that's downwind of it, it's not the best. If the wind's coming out of the south, that means the people to the north of the fire, that it's going to have the fire blow towards them, or at least the smoke. So for you folks, where are we? We're kind of northwest of the fire. So you would have to have a north or southeast wind blowing in that direction. The fire would also have to jump across the reservoir too, and the Bull Run River itself, and get past all of our control lines and suppression efforts that we're taking. So I'm not, like I said before, I'm not in the business of giving odds, but you would need a southeast wind, and then we would also need hot and dry conditions, probably spotting. So what we would end up having was the ground fire would get fairly intense. It would then start getting into the canopy. Once it gets into the canopy, it starts throwing embers. I mean, if you've ever burned leaves in your yard and you kind of see the convective heat from, like a hot air balloon, it lifts some of the burning leaves up and it starts floating around. Most times, by the time it lands on the ground, it's gone out already. But when we generate a lot of heat coming from a wildfire with 200-foot tall trees burning all at once, the amount of convective lift is pretty high, which means it can lift some pretty good sized burning firebrands and send them half-mile, sometimes even further under extreme circumstances. So it's pretty much what we would have to have, is that type of hot, dry, windy scenario out of the southeast for the fire to go towards Corbett. So hopefully that helps explain the answer. One of the things that we try to do to help avoid that is, as Isaac was describing, we've already started doing firing operations off the 12 road to bring the main fire down. Our plan is to continue doing that all on the road, bring it all the way down. Once it gets close to the road, we're going to start mopping it up, bring in the water tenders, the engines to cool it off, extinguish all the flames, which means we reduce that spotting potential that I talked about. So if we can take the heat out of it, So it doesn't allow the fire to build the intensity to get up in the canopy. Then we reduce the spotting potential, which means, we keep the fire on the ground and it's not playing hopscotch with us.
So there are a lot of questions coming in about an updated acreage, and unfortunately, due to the low visibility, we haven't been able to perform an infrared flight. Like Isaac mentioned, it's so thick and hard even on the ground that people are using headlamps to see. Just think about that higher. So as soon as it's possible, we will get an infrared flight to map it. But Evans can probably address this current behavior and size.
Based on what operations has been reporting, I would guess yesterday we probably gained about 200 acres. And then today we probably gained about the same amount. So starting from 1,600 acres, adding another 400, I wouldn't be surprised if our infrared mapping tonight shows the fire's right around 2,000 acres. So, but that's ballpark. So plus or minus, a few hundred. So be gentle with me on that one.
I just have a rather ignorant question, which is, I think the language, just trying to catch on to the language of fighting the fire, you talked about bringing the fire down to the road or some language like that. What does that look like on the ground?
Okay.
Thank you.
I can take a stab at that. Does anybody have a lighter? Does anybody have a match or a lighter? No? Nobody smokes anymore. Okay. All right. So bear with me. So we have two basic types of fire behavior. You have head fire and backing fire. And so a lot of what this fire is doing coming down off this ridge, it's backing downhill. Okay. The reason fire likes to burn more intensely as it goes uphill, and the reason for that is because the flames are bent closer to the next set of fuels that it's going to ignite. I mean, if you just had a flame like here and a flat ground, the fire and the heat is just going to go straight up. Okay. But if you put it on a hillside like this, and then you also have some flames, the flame is bent a lot closer to the fuels that are on the uphill side, which means it preheats it, ignites it, and then just keeps growing. And then, of course, once fire gets big enough, it generates its own wind, and then the wind helps push it up the hill. That's head fire. So backing fire is light that match that I was talking about and hold it straight up. You have about what, maybe an inch of flame, or maybe half inch of flame. It's going straight up, and it's slow. That flame slowly backs down the matchstick or burns the matchstick. Okay, but what would happen if you suddenly turn that match upside down? I know some of you have done it. You burn your finger, right? Because now the flame is able to burn right up the matchstick, and that matchstick, the wood, feeds the fire, and we go from a half-inch flame to 2 or 3 inch flame. So that's the difference between backing fire and head fire. Head fire is a lot more intense, and sometimes it's harder to control. So backing fire, the upright match that only has a half-inch flame that's slowly working its way down, that's what we want. So if we were to conduct additional firing operations, we would start up top, high up on the hillside, light a fire with, we have these things called drip torches, which is like a 1.5 gallon can with a little wick on it. We pour a little fuel on the ground, it's lit on fire, then we walk away, let that grow. It'll start burning, and then once, let's just say it only has 20 feet of uphill to go before it runs into the main fire. Well, it's not going to build that much intensity in that 20 feet, but then it'll start backing its way down. So that's what we want. So we want it to back down. So then we walk another 20 or 30 feet. We light another little small spot, let it run up the hill a short distance, but not too much before it builds intensity. The rest of it will back down. We try to be patient and not get over hasty. So we only put as much fire as we want to see. And as long as it's backing very nicely, great. We let it back on its own. But if it's not backing nicely or it's not doing a whole lot of movement, then we'll send some more people up there. They'll do similar burn ignition patterns until we bring that fire down the hill. If we were to go to the base of the hill and light it, what do you think would happen? It's like that matchstick upside down, right? It would get really hot really fast, run up the hill, and burn at a lot higher intensity. One of the things that we're cognizant of is, well, two things. We don't want to burn it that hot because it'll be hard for us to control. But the other reason we don't want to burn it that hot is it'll burn at a higher severity, which means the potential for erosion post-fire goes way up. We would like to leave a little bit of green vegetation out there, maybe some logs that not completely burned up. We don't want to burn everything completely to ash. It'd be good to leave some sediment out there, or or large woody debris that can act as sediment filters later on this winter when you get the winter rains, and so to prevent a lot of that erosion and sedimentation into the creek bottoms. Hopefully that answers that question.
Another question from online is how much of the fire is in the canopy, and could this potentially be a stand replacing fire?
Right now, most of the fire is on the ground. Because if it was in the canopy, we'd be having problems. so it's on the ground for the most part. As far as stand replacing, it's hard to say. I mean, it's going to be patchwork. Like it's going to be patchy. You're going to have some areas where it burned a lot hotter because there's just a lot more fuels right there, and the fire itself got hot, and those trees may die. Other places, the fire mostly stayed to the ground, in which case lower intensity fire. And the Douglas fir out there, especially the 40, 50-inch diameter ones or even bigger, the bark is fairly thick. So it's possible that some of those bigger trees may survive, in which case it won't be stand replacing in those areas. But you got to remember, fire is a natural part of this ecosystem out west. And so if you look at the history, the fire history of the entire west, especially like the Willamette Valley, there were some large fires that burned but at varying intensities. Some places they burned at the stand replacing intensity, but until it ran into a patch of either younger or lighter fuels, and then the fire dropped in intensity, and then so it survived. So what we ended up over time was a patchwork out there. I suspect we're going to end up with very similar patchwork out there.
All right, not seeing any more questions in here, and virtually we'll keep answering the questions, but I would like to allow some time for all of you to talk to some of our subject matter experts that have been sitting up here, get some one-on-one questions answered. You can go to the maps here. We have operations, so that'll be more of the fire managers here, power, evacuations, questions about the forest over there. But before I let you all break out, I just want to remind everyone that to find the best and accurate information, please go to the Camp Creek Facebook and INCIWeb. INCIWeb is INCIWEB. So the Camp Creek Fire Facebook or Camp Creek Fire INCIWeb. And on there, we'll be posting about some pop-ups that we're going to be doing. That's where we'll have information officers staged around the communities from set times so that you can talk to them face to face and look at maps and any of the new information. As far as the next public meeting, stay tuned. We will post where the next location is, looking more towards the weekend. Thank you so much for having us in your community. We really appreciate it, and we will talk to you later. Thank you so much.